Pay attention. Thought is energy. Focus is power. When a woman's mind keeps returning to one man, something deeper than emotion is at work. This isn't about obsession or fantasy, it's about presence, impact, and the kind of character that leaves a mark. When a man enters a woman's thoughts repeatedly, it's because he activated something meaningful. And when that happens, three powerful shifts begin to take place in him. First, his presence gains weight. When a woman can't stop thinking about a man, his words carry more meaning, his actions linger longer, and his absence is felt more deeply. He doesn't need to demand attention, his energy already holds it. This happens when a man is grounded, consistent, and authentic. He doesn't perform for approval, he stands firm in who he is. That steadiness creates emotional gravity, and gravity pulls without effort. Second, his standards rise. Being held in someone's thoughts is a responsibility, whether spoken or not. A man who senses this doesn't become arrogant, he becomes intentional. He sharpens his discipline. He becomes more aware of his actions, his direction, his integrity, not to impress, but because he understands that influence requires alignment. When someone values you deeply, it challenges you to become deeper yourself. Third, his impact outlies the moment. When a woman continues to think about a man, it's rarely about what he said once, it's about how he made her feel consistently, calm, safe, respected, inspired. That impact doesn't fade when the conversation ends. It stays. And a man who leaves that kind of imprint understands that real connection isn't built through intensity but through character. When a man's presence becomes powerful, it is not because he demands attention, but because attention naturally settles on him. Power in presence is quiet. It doesn't rush, doesn't perform, and doesn't try to be seen. It is felt. When a woman can't stop thinking about a man, it's often because his presence created a shift in her internal state. Something about him slowed her down, grounded her, or made her feel more aware. That kind of presence is rare because most people are mentally scattered, emotionally reactive, and constantly seeking validation. A powerful presence begins with inner stillness. A man who is calm within himself brings a sense of stability into every interaction. He listens without impatience. He speaks without needing to dominate the conversation. He doesn't fill silence out of discomfort. This ease creates contrast in a world full of noise. When someone is comfortable with silence, others feel it. Silence becomes meaningful instead of awkward, and meaning lingers in the mind long after the moment passes. When a woman keeps thinking about a man, it's often because he wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't overly agreeable or overly distant. He was simply aligned with himself. That alignment creates coherence between words, actions, and energy. Nothing feels forced. Nothing feels exaggerated. This consistency gives his presence weight because the mind trusts what feels real. Trust is what allows thoughts to return again and again. Powerful presence also comes from emotional regulation. A man who doesn't react impulsively stands out. He doesn't mirror chaos. He doesn't escalate tension. He remains steady whether things are smooth or uncertain. This steadiness creates emotional safety. When someone feels emotionally safe, their mind replays the interaction, not out of anxiety, but out of calm curiosity. Safety invites reflection. Reflection turns into remembrance. Another reason presence becomes powerful is intentional attention. When a man is present, he is fully present. He isn't distracted, scanning the room, or half engaged. His attention is focused, and focused attention makes others feel seen without being overwhelmed. This kind of attention is not constant, but when it's there, it's real. The mind remembers moments where it felt fully acknowledged, and it revisits them naturally. A powerful presence also comes from self-containment. A man who is not emotionally dependent on reactions creates space rather than pressure. He doesn't seek constant feedback or reassurance. He doesn't rush outcomes. This lack of urgency allows attraction to unfold naturally. When nothing is forced, the mind fills the gaps on its own. Space gives thoughts room to grow. When a woman thinks about a man repeatedly, it's often because he left something unresolved in a good way. Not confusion, but depth. He didn't explain everything. He didn't reveal everything. He allowed layers to remain. This isn't about being mysterious on purpose, but about having depth that can't be accessed all at once. Depth invites thought. Shallow interactions are consumed quickly, forgotten just as fast. Presence gains power when a man respects himself. Self-respect is felt immediately. It shows in posture, tone, and boundaries. A man who doesn't tolerate disrespect quietly commands respect. He doesn't need to announce standards. They are evident in what he allows and what he walks away from. This self-respect creates psychological impact. The mind notices strength that doesn't need to be proven. Consistency also strengthens presence. A man whose behavior doesn't shift drastically based on mood or circumstance feels reliable. Reliability builds trust. Trust deepens impact. When someone knows what to expect from you emotionally, your presence becomes grounding rather than draining. Grounding presence stays with people because it brings relief from uncertainty. A powerful presence is also shaped by purpose. A man who has direction carries a different energy. He is not drifting. He is not waiting to be defined by others. His life has movement. This sense of direction gives weight to his words and actions. When someone knows where they're going, even subconsciously, others feel it. Direction creates gravity. When a woman can't stop thinking about a man, it's rarely because he said the perfect thing. It's because he made her feel something stable, calm, or elevated. Feelings anchored in stability last longer than feelings driven by excitement. Excitement spikes and fades. Stability settles and stays. A man with powerful presence doesn't chase attention. He attracts it by being anchored in himself. He doesn't try to be unforgettable. He simply shows up fully, honestly, and with intention. And that kind of presence doesn't disappear when the interaction ends. It echoes. It revisits the mind quietly. It becomes something felt rather than something explained. When a man realizes he occupies space in someone's thoughts, something subtle but powerful shifts within him. It's not about ego or validation. It's about awareness. Awareness brings responsibility. He becomes more conscious of who he is, how he moves, and what he represents. His standards rise not because someone expects more from him, but because he expects more for himself. Influence, even unspoken, demands alignment. A man whose standards rise begins to move with intention. He no longer acts impulsively or carelessly because he understands that every action reflects his inner world. He becomes selective with his words not because he is afraid to speak, but because he understands the weight they carry. He doesn't promise what he can't maintain. He doesn't perform emotions he can't sustain. Integrity becomes non-negotiable because inconsistency would feel like self-betrayal. Higher standards also reshape discipline. He becomes more structured in his habits, his routines, and his decisions. Not out of pressure, but out of clarity. When a man knows his presence matters, he sharpens himself. He trains his mind. He strengthens his body. He refines his lifestyle. This isn't about perfection. It's about alignment between intention and action. Discipline becomes a form of respect for himself first. As standards rise, tolerance for chaos drops. A man no longer entertains distractions that pull him away from his direction. He becomes aware of what drains his energy and what builds it. He stops justifying poor habits, weak excuses, or emotional reactivity. Growth becomes more important than comfort. He understands that how he lives privately eventually shows publicly, and he chooses to live in a way that reflects strength even when no one is watching. Rising standards also affect how he treats others. He becomes more considerate, not softer but more precise. He listens better. He responds rather than reacts. He understands that leadership in connection comes from emotional control, not dominance. This maturity doesn't come from trying to impress, but from understanding impact. When someone values you deeply, it highlights the importance of being someone worthy of that value. A man with elevated standards doesn't seek attention, he seeks alignment. He becomes less interested in surface-level interactions and more drawn to depth. Small talk loses appeal. Meaning becomes the focus. He no longer engages just to fill space or pass time. His presence becomes intentional because his time becomes valuable. Value changes behavior. As his standards rise, accountability sharpens. He no longer blames circumstances or other people for his shortcomings. He looks inward first. Responsibility replaces excuses. This internal shift builds quiet confidence. Confidence rooted in accountability is stable because it doesn't depend on outcomes or praise. It comes from knowing that effort is honest and direction is clear. Higher standards also refine boundaries. A man becomes clear about what he allows into his life. He doesn't overextend emotionally. He doesn't tolerate disrespect, manipulation, or inconsistency. This isn't rigidity, it's self-respect. Boundaries protect focus. Focus protects growth. Growth reinforces standards. The cycle strengthens itself. A man whose standards rise also becomes patient. He stops rushing results, relationships, or recognition. He understands that anything meaningful takes time. Patience replaces urgency. Urgency often comes from insecurity. Patience comes from confidence in one's path. This patience is felt by others. It creates a sense of calm authority rather than pressure. With higher standards comes emotional restraint. He doesn't overshare. He doesn't overreact. He doesn't give access to his inner world without discernment. This restraint isn't emotional unavailability, it's emotional intelligence. He understands that not every thought needs expression and not every feeling needs action. Control becomes a strength. His self-image evolves. He no longer sees himself as someone seeking approval, but as someone setting an example. He becomes aware that his actions can either elevate or diminish his presence. This awareness fuels consistency. Consistency builds trust. Trust deepens impact. As standards rise, so does humility. A man who is truly growing doesn't feel the need to announce it. He lets behavior speak. He remains open to learning, correction, and refinement. He understands that strength without humility becomes arrogance, and arrogance weakens influence. The rise in standards also affects ambition. Goals become clearer, effort becomes focused. Distractions lose their appeal because direction is defined. He no longer measures success by comparison, but by progress. Progress becomes personal. This internal metric keeps him grounded regardless of external validation. A man with high standards doesn't fear losing those who cannot meet him where he stands. He understands that misalignment is not rejection, it is information. This acceptance removes desperation. It allows him to move forward without bitterness or attachment to outcomes. When standards rise naturally, behavior follows effortlessly. There is no performance, no pretending, no forcing growth. There is only alignment between who he is becoming and how he lives. That alignment strengthens presence, deepens character, and shapes a man whose actions reflect purpose, discipline, and quiet authority. When a man's impact lasts beyond the moment, it means he has touched something deeper than surface emotion. It is not about charm, appearance, or perfectly chosen words. It is about how he altered someone's internal state in a way that remains even when he is no longer present. This kind of impact doesn't fade with time, because it was never dependent on excitement. It was built on consistency, emotional depth, and character. Lasting impact comes from how a man makes a woman feel within herself. Not rushed, not pressured, not confused, but grounded. When an interaction leaves someone feeling calmer, clearer, or more centered, the mind naturally returns to it. The body remembers safety. The mind remembers clarity. These impressions are subtle, but they are powerful because they contrast with the emotional noise most interactions create. A man who leaves a lasting imprint does not overwhelm with intensity. Intensity burns fast and disappears just as quickly. Instead, he brings steadiness. He shows up the same way regardless of mood or circumstance. His tone doesn't shift dramatically. His values don't bend for convenience. This consistency creates trust, and trust is what allows impact to endure. When someone feels they can rely on the emotional experience you provide, that experience stays with them. Impact also lasts when a man is emotionally present without being intrusive. He knows when to speak and when to listen. He allows space for expression without trying to control it. He doesn't rush to fix, dominate, or impress. This presence feels respectful. Respect lingers because it affirms dignity. Moments where someone feels respected tend to replay internally because they are rare and meaningful. Another reason impact endures is because of restraint. A man who doesn't reveal everything at once allows depth to unfold naturally. This is not withholding, it is pacing. When depth is revealed gradually, the mind continues to engage. It reflects, revisits, and explores what was felt rather than consuming it all at once. Depth creates echo. Shallow experiences end quickly because there is nothing to return to. Lasting impact is also built through alignment between words and actions. When a man does what he says and says only what he means, he becomes credible. Credibility anchors memory. The mind trusts consistency and revisits it because it feels stable. In contrast, inconsistency creates confusion, which exhausts rather than deepens thought. A man whose impact lasts does not rely on constant contact to remain present in someone's mind. His influence exists independently of proximity. This happens when interactions feel complete rather than draining. There is no emotional residue of anxiety or unanswered pressure, only a sense of calm reflection. Calm reflections last longer because they don't demand resolution. Impact also endures when a man represents something larger than the interaction itself. Purpose, direction, discipline, and self-respect give weight to presence. When someone senses that a man is building something meaningful in his life, it elevates how he is perceived. His actions feel intentional rather than accidental. Intentionality creates significance, and significance is remembered. A lasting impression is often created through emotional regulation. A man who remains composed under uncertainty stands out. He doesn't react impulsively or defensively. He holds his ground without force. This emotional stability becomes a reference point. When the mind encounters chaos elsewhere, it subconsciously compares it to the calm it once felt. That comparison brings him back into thought. Impact lasts when a man does not try to be unforgettable. Effort to be remembered often feels forced. Authentic presence does the opposite. It allows connection to form naturally. Natural experiences are processed more deeply because they feel real. The mind trusts real experiences and stores them differently. A man who leaves lasting impact also understands boundaries. He does not overstep emotionally or demand access. He allows connection to grow without entitlement. This respect for boundaries makes interactions feel safe and dignified. Dignity stays with people. It shapes how they remember you long after the moment passes. Consistency in character strengthens impact over time. When a man behaves with the same integrity across different situations, he becomes predictable in the best way. Predictability, rooted in values, creates comfort. Comfort doesn't fade easily because it meets a fundamental emotional need. Impact also lasts because of what is not said. Sometimes it is the absence of pressure, the absence of manipulation, the absence of emotional games that leaves the strongest mark. When someone experiences ease instead of tension, clarity instead of confusion, their mind returns to that experience instinctively. A man whose impact lasts understands that connection is not about taking space in someone's life, but about adding quality to it. When quality is added, memory preserves it. The mind does not hold on to every interaction, only the ones that felt meaningful, grounding, or elevating. This is how impact outlives moments. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is steady, intentional, and rooted in character. It stays not because it demands attention, but because it deserves reflection. Become the kind of man whose presence is felt even in silence. Build discipline so your actions align with your words. Develop depth so your impact lasts longer than attention. Stop chasing reactions, start cultivating character, and let your consistency make you unforgettable.